Our calendars are rolling through October, which for me means three things. Number one means it's time for postseason baseball. My beloved Chicago Cubbies won the NL Central again this year and are now one win away from a third straight appearance in the NLCS playoff series, which I never thought I'd be able to say. So I'm very, very excited about that. The second thing that October means is the return of everything pumpkin flavored, and I am a huge sucker for pumpkin pie. And I'm particularly fond of buffets like Golden Corral that serve pumpkin pie every fall. And places like Golden Corral are great because after my main course of exclusively starch and protein, I can balance the rest of my meal and get all of my dairy, grain, fruits, and vegetables all in the dessert line. Now, hear me out on this. Cheese is a dairy product, so I take a slice of cheesecake. Bread is a grain, so I fill a bowl of bread pudding. Bananas and pumpkins are fruit, so I heap on generous portions of banana pudding and pumpkin pie. And carrot cake has to be a vegetable, right? Well, at least it is in my book. Now, my healthcare providers might disagree with my assessment on that, but regardless, everything that I enjoy at Golden Corral, all of the wheat in the bread pudding and all of the corn and the syrup in my Mountain Dew, all of those crops were planted and harvested somewhere. And that's the other beauty of October. It's harvest season. 2017 crops are looking pretty good. The yields are very, very strong this year. The recent rains that we've had should be good to finish up the soybeans. Corn's coming on a little bit slower, but it'll get done in God's time. Now, like some of you, I grew up participating in the 4-H program. I showed hogs for 10 years and dabbled in some other non-ag related projects, including public speaking. Go figure. And the 4-H fair was a staple of my summer. Every second or third week of July, there I'd be. Teenage Jay and his best friend scrounging up as much spare change as we could find to purchase as many milkshakes from the Farm Bureau tent as we could afford, and then walking back to the barn to listen to as many old Bob and Tom cassette tapes as we could find in our parents' collections. And life was wonderful, but it became so routine that I never really thought twice about it. That was anyway until about 9 years ago this month. I crossed paths with a beautiful, beautiful, charming young lady with a Chicago accent I immediately identified. And she and I got to talking about our childhoods, and I very matter-of-factly and nonchalantly said that my summers were spent doing 4-H. And the puzzled face staring back at me asked very innocently, well, what's 4-H? And in so many words, I probably said something to the effect that 4-H is a youth activity where on the hottest and most humid Saturday in July, my best friend and I would wake up incredibly early in the morning to go show our Duroc barrows. And her face was still very puzzled, so I thought I would clarify myself by saying Duroc barrows, as opposed to Tamworth, Hampshire, Poland, China, Chester White, or Bluebot barrows. Well, most of the time, the only person laughing at Jay's jokes is Jay, but it must have been my lucky night because that beautiful, charming girl with a Chicago accent is now sitting upstairs working on something, so I guess it worked out pretty well for me. But now, to be fair, she gets plenty of opportunities to laugh at my ignorance, usually about matters related to celebrities and pop culture. A few weeks ago, we were watching the Emmys on TV, which I enjoy, but admittedly know very little about. And they're naming the nominees for Best Supporting Actor in a limited series or TV movie, and the winner was some guy named Alexander Skarsgård, who I've never heard of before, but apparently he appears in a show called Big Little Lies. Well, I leaned over to Laura and I said, wait, are they talking about Pretty Little Liars? I thought that show was over. Pretty Little Liars is over, Jay. You and I watched the series finale together. They're not talking about Pretty Little Liars. They're talking about Big Little Lies. You mean like True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis? No, Jay, not True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis. They're talking about Big Little Lies with Alexander Skarsgård and Nicole Kidman. Well, who's Alexander Skarsgård? Alexander Skarsgård is the gorgeous man on TV accepting his Emmy Award for his role in Big Little Lies. I thought you said Ryan Gosling was the gorgeous man in The Big Short. Ryan Gosling is the gorgeous man in The Big Short. They're not talking about The Big Short. They're talking about Big Little Lies with Alexander Skarsgård. Well, needless to say, I was lost most of the night. But if you're familiar with the Emmys, though, you know that they always have that part where they pay tribute to celebrities that passed away sometime over the last year. So we're watching, and the names and faces are scrolling by, and we start to see people that I recognize. Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds and John Hurd, the dad from Home Alone. And then we see Glenn Campbell. Now, as a little boy, my attention span during Sunday sermons like this were probably a little hit or miss, but my parents regularly perform offertory music. So in any given week, I would hear a 4-minute song practiced over and over and over again until it was flawless. Enter Glenn Campbell. Well, in 1984, Glenn Campbell released a song called Come Harvest Time. A beautiful song in its own right, but also a piece perfectly suited for a farmer to sing at his church. And how vividly I can remember Mom seated at the piano in the living room, Dad standing over her shoulder so he could see the music. Mom's soft accompaniment begins, and then I hear Dad's voice. Planted by God in a field without worth, we are but seeds in his eyes. So he nurtures with grace, and his hands work the earth, that his fruit may be sanctified come harvest time. Come harvest time, what thanksgiving we will show, when the plowman brings freedom from the earth here below. Come harvest time, oh what joy will be known, when he gathers the souls of the seeds he has sown. So when doubt drives the land or the cold war winds blow, when the floods of indifference rise, oh, the roots that faith grew will keep us strong till our last sunset leaves the sky. Come harvest time. Come harvest time, what thanksgiving we will show, when the plowman brings freedom from the earth here below. Come harvest time, oh, what joy will be known, when he gathers the souls of the seeds he has sown. Now, in many ways, our Christian walk, our faith journey, is a lot like planting a row of crops. You do your best to steer and not get out of line, but that's not without its challenges. You hit bumps, you get exhausted, you get lonely, you hunger and thirst, things break down, you experience darkness, worry, uncertainty, and loss. In 1988, the United States experienced historic levels of drought. Between June and August, portions of Indiana recorded their second warmest temperatures on record at that time. And by the end of September, precipitation levels statewide were almost 8 inches below normal. Crops were lost, livestock were lost, money was lost, and sleep was lost, I imagine, for Craig and Sandy Wood, who were expecting a baby boy the following February. But in a season filled with so much worry, uncertainty, and loss, where was God? Well, Ecclesiastes assures us that to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Now, for Craig and Sandy Wood and thousands of farmers and ranchers across this country, the drought of 1988 was a season. A difficult season, no doubt, but a season. A season that, too, would pass. And folks, if you ask me why I have faith, my answer is pretty simple. I tell people that I learned the circle of life by watching livestock go from breeding to butcher. And I learned faith by knowing that God cares for us through every season. God was sitting there in the cab of that combine, holding my dad's hands steady as he harvested rows and rows of dried up grain. And God was watching over my mom through every day of my development. From the very beginning, God's hands have worked the earth, and it was from the dust of those fields that God's hands created life. Psalm 139, verses 13 through 17 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body, and all the days for me were written in your book before even one of them came to be." God cares for us through every season. He's present in the miracle of life conceived by the flesh, and he's present still in the miracle of life reborn in the Holy Spirit and washed in the blood of Jesus Christ. In his letter to the Romans, the Apostle Paul writes, "I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God through salvation to everyone who believes. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. For as it is written, the just shall live by faith." Our time on earth is a continual journey through the seasons. And from the time of our planting forward, God cultivates and nurtures the life he has created. Are there times of drought? Yes. Are there times of bounty? Yes. Are there times when you feel like God's driving the manure spreader and he's not really spreading it out very much, he's just all kind of piling it on you? Yes. But the thing about manure spreaders is this. Do they stink in the moment? Oh, of course they do. But what's really happening there? It's fertilizer. It's making the plant stronger and tougher and more mature for the days ahead. If God wanted to crush you, he'd just spray you with herbicide. You get a big old jug of Roundup or whatever brand God uses. I personally prefer Roundup. And he'd just finish you off right there. But folks, the good news for you and me is that God's not in the herbicide business. God's in the fertilizer business. Through every season, pleasant or unpleasant, God's hands are cultivating and nurturing the life he has created. And God gives us everything that we need. The sun, the rain, the nitrogen, the anhydrous ammonia, the fertilizer, everything that we need. Everything we need to succeed. All God asks in return is our faith and acceptance in Jesus Christ. And if Jesus is living in our hearts, then when the time comes to harvest, we will dwell in the garner of the Lord forever. Amen.